Again, thank you, Andres and Richard, for your moving reflections, and Andres and Stephanie for your lovely music. I was deeply moved by Richard's tribute to his friend Ron. True friendship is indeed grounded in a promise of mutual support through all the phases of life, in joy and in sorrow, unto death, even if not stated formally in covenantal language. Likewise, I am moved by Andres's reflection, by its humility and good advice, and warmth and humor. Later this month, our congregation will be writing and adopting a new covenant specific to our own needs and concerns. A covenant is a formal promise that people make to guide how they relate to one another. By exploring, drafting, and then agreeing to certain words, and by repeating and revisiting them often, we are reminded to keep our promises and to repair damage when we fail to do so. A covenant is not a weapon we should use to enforce conformity, or a superficial acknowledgement of how we'd like others to behave, but a mutual promise from each of our hearts to do and keep on doing what we believe is right and good. Marriage vows are a common example of a covenant. You may ask then, if covenants are so desirable and necessary to get us to keep our promises, then why do so many marriages fail? We say these usually generic and formulaic words about in sickness and in health till death do us part. Or maybe we write our own vows, and in most cases, sincerely believing them in the moment. But some years later, they may no longer make sense to us. We must break our vows and move on, sometimes mutually and amicably, but sadly often not. Now, my brother and sister-in-law have defied the odds to have a long and successful marriage. They joke that at the end of each year, they go out to dinner to renegotiate their contract. I doubt they sit down to bargain and edit a formal written agreement. But they certainly do go out to dinner and talk about it. And I like this concept. Needs and circumstances change in all relationships. If we are stuck with a promise that no longer speaks from our hearts, as I myself have experienced recently, then maybe that promise needs updating or even ending. As a congregation, I hope we revisit our new covenant regularly so that it remains a promise from the heart. In our denomination today, there is a movement to change our written principles and sources. Now, I love the current principles and sources. I love the poetic language in which they were written, the open, positive, and inspirational tone, stated as if we already believe them wholeheartedly, are truly committed to carrying them out, and don't need to be reminded or shamed into doing so. They still speak to me as a promise from the heart. And I sincerely believe that if we lived them full out, we would need no changes or additions. Yet, I also understand the desire to change them. Like many marriage vows, their genuinely moving words have become for many a stale formula we recite by rote, a litany without much thought or deeper commitment, words without flesh, like a religious pledge of allegiance. We look at our own internal problems and those of our broader society and recognize that these words have not carried us as far as we would like. But words alone do not have flesh, no matter how well written. Whatever language we adopt in the future, it remains our job to enflesh and embody it. The role of a covenant is to remind us, to make our promises a force of habit, something we do as routinely as brushing our teeth in the morning. Yet, paradoxically, habits and routines, almost by definition, become things hard to change, even when they no longer meet our needs. My brother and sister-in-law are right to review and adjust their promises regularly, because their needs change over time, and they need to think through what they believe and want now. What are their hearts saying in this moment, as opposed to the first time they pledged a lifelong commitment? Even if, after review, they end up changing nothing since last year, the old vows are refreshed and renewed, fully present, once again becoming a promise of the heart. And with that in mind, I have a caution about both our new covenant and the denominational debate. It's this: may whatever language we adopt truly be a promise from the heart that each of us makes freely and mutually. May we have the courage to speak up if we catch ourselves about to make a promise that is not from the heart. As I look back over my own life, there are promises I have not kept and ones that I have. The promises I failed to keep were those that were not, or ceased to be, aligned with my heart. Those relationships I entered for opportunistic reasons to gain practical benefits I was failing to achieve on my own, convincing myself in the moment that I was acting from love, not neediness. The organizations and individuals I committed to sincerely for the right reasons, but then failed to speak up when circumstances required adjustments or changing needs arose, creating resentment on all sides that eventually led to a breaking point. The promises I made with such dogmatic zeal that they crumbled in the harsh light of reality. The promises I made only to avoid conflict or to look worthy to others of the love and respect I craved, knowing full well those promises were not coming from my heart. Now, there are times when it is not wise to be fully honest, transparent, or committed. In fact, the ability to get away with doing so is often an unearned privilege. Defy your boss and you can get fired, for example, and your family can end up on the street, while someone else might afford that risk without breaking any promises to support their loved ones. But that's not what I'm talking about. We all say things we don't believe and make promises we have no desire or intention to keep on occasion. And that may be fully justified if it keeps a roof over your children's heads. Your promise to them is more important. That's the promise from your heart, the promise you will keep, no matter how much moral angst it may cause. The promises I have kept were those grounded in love and in my deepest beliefs, such as love for my children and my faith in the positive and necessary role of the working class in creating lasting liberation. Covenant, as Andres mentioned, does not always mean we get it right. We aren't perfect. Limited by my own traumas and misdiagnosed mental health challenges, I was not the greatest parent, but I kept trying and became a far better parent to my second child than my first, doggedly determined to create a better life for them than the one I had had thus far. I went through many betrayals in my work in the hard left and the labor movement, some worsened by my lack of effectively nuanced social skills and lack of self-esteem, as well as by sexism and ableism. But I never gave up. And now I finally have a job doing what I could only have dreamed of doing 50 years ago. To conclude then, let's take this business of creating covenants seriously and even cautiously. Let's give each other the grace to disagree, to speak up, and debate over language without seeing each other as living in enemy camps. Let's make promises we can believe in deeply enough to work hard on keeping. Let's make promises from the heart, living, breathing promises with bones and flesh and spirit. Promises that can grow and shift and mature. Promises that, even though they will age and die, have also given birth, nurturing their descendants. Thank you.